Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Nihongo Master podcast. I'm your host Hazra, and we're kicking off a new season yet again. Season 11's theme is a little more fun and lighter than the previous one, but also shorter. As we welcome the month of March, we also say goodbye to winter and hello to spring. Yep, this season, which is just a month-long one, will look at Japanese spring. And what do we associate spring in Japan with? I don't know about you, but I naturally think of cherry blossoms. The unofficial flower of Japan is going to be the topic to kick off this season. There is so much buzz surrounding it, you'd think it's significant in the Japanese culture. You're right. The flower and everything that comes with it takes up a huge part of the tradition that is extremely visible to this very day. Sakura is a thing of the past, present, and future of Japan. Let's delve into the significance of cherry blossom in Japanese culture. So, what exactly is Sakura? I think most of you already know what it is, but I'm going to cover the basics anyway. The word Sakura is the Japanese name for a specific type of flower that grows on cherry blossom trees. Some might argue that it's not any type of cherry blossom. It's only the Prunus cerulata, which is the Japanese cherry that is native to Japan as well as Korea and China. In the eyes of the Japanese, these cherry blossoms are the most beautiful Japanese flowers, or hana in Japanese. We'll look at the various types of sakura in the later part of this episode. And unlike cherry trees, cherry blossom trees don't produce fruit, but instead bloom beautiful flowers. They bloom only once a year, in haru, or spring. Even though cherry blossoms can be found all around the world, it's extremely prominent in Japan. Sakura became such an iconic image for the country that some people even call it Japan's informal national flower. Oh, and if you don't know what the official national flower is, fun fact is the chrysanthemum. Before we get into the next section, here's a quick vocab recap. Sakura, cherry blossom flowers. Hana, flower. Haru, spring. So, since Sakura is so highly associated with the country, what does it symbolize in Japan? The blossoming of these delicate and radiant flowers not only symbolizes the beginning of spring, there are actually quite a few other significance to Sakura. In fact, Sakura has a rich history and identity in Japanese culture. So we're throwing it way back, where originally sakuras were used to predict the year's harvest. Farmers kept an eye out for the blooming of sakuras to indicate to them the ideal time to plant their crops. Throughout time, it has become the representation of Shinto ideals of impermanence and renewal, as well as the wabi-sabi philosophy, a Japanese aesthetic that centers itself on the acceptance of imperfection and temporariness, while acknowledging the beauty in them. Most commonly nowadays, the blooming of the sakura symbolizes human mortality to many Japanese people, and how short and precious life is. Just like the flower, it is beautiful and brilliant during its strongest bloom, but withers away when the time comes, reflecting its fragility. This fragility of sakura blooms can be described perfectly through a Buddhist notion of mono no aware, which has a loose meaning of bringing awareness to the impermanence of things, which leads to the heightening awareness of their beauty. Sakuras are also a symbol of good luck and hope, because the blooming of cherry blossoms are also the start of a school year in Japan. The start of the new school term in Japanese is Shingakki. So because of all this symbolism and deep roots in tradition, many Japanese shops will have sakura-themed products, and the country is flooded with sakura events during this time of the year. It's no surprise that this is also the most popular time to visit the land of the rising sun. Now, for a quick vocab recap. Wabi-sabi, a Japanese aesthetic that sees the beauty in imperfection. Mono no aware, a Buddhist notion that loosely translates to bringing awareness to the impermanence of things. Shingakki, the start of the new school term in spring. By the way, if you haven't checked out our official website yet, why not give it a browse? At Nihongo Master, we offer efficient Japanese lessons that are quick, easy, and fun for Japanese language learners of all levels, from beginners to advanced. Our smart tools will assist you in areas where you need a little bit of a push and congratulate you on the ones you've aced. With a community of over 50,000 Japanese students, you're not alone on your learning journey. Make new friends and improve together with our point system, collecting points as you go along. Ask away any questions you have on our group discussion pages. There's sure to be others as well as our Japanese instructors that are quick to answer. You can also take Nihongo Master with you on the go and learn Japanese as you trot the globe. Practical, right? As we briefly mentioned earlier, there are quite a few types of Japanese cherry blossom trees spread all across the country. In fact, there is quite a variety of them of over 200, including both cultivated and wild types. All of the cherry blossoms share similar traits though, which may be why many would just skim them over and conclude that they're all the same. Peep a little closer and you'll see a variation in size, color, and even shape. The most common one of Japanese cherry trees is the Somei Yoshino. This cultivated type of sakura is a single flowering variety and has 5 petals for each flower, blooming in clustered bunches on a cherry tree. The pink tint of this cherry blossom is so pale that it appears nearly white. Another common sakura is the Yamazakura, which unlike the Somei Yoshino, is a wild sakura variety. Also known as the hill cherry, because of its location being among Japan's mountains, this type of cherry blossom is also a faded tint of pink with 5 petals each flower. Keep an eye out for Shidare Sakura, which is known in English as the Japanese weeping cherry tree. The tree's drooping branches are the reason why it's called that. The Shidare Sakura cherry blossom type blooms earlier in the season compared to the rest. And here's a tip for when you go to Japan in spring. The most famous place to see this variety is the Miharu Takizakura in Fukushima, which has been growing for over 1,000 years. And even though the mentioned above are the most popular and well-known of them all, that's not to say that there aren't other varieties that are more common in certain areas than these. You'd have to do your sakura research even deeper to know all. Now before we wrap this episode up, let's take a look at what the sakura season is, a common phrase you'll hear so often in Japan. The weeks of these flowers blooming make up the cherry blossom season. Now, the sakura blooming is such an anticipated event every year that there are tons of cherry blossom forecasts, or kaikoyoso, months before the expected bloom. The tracking of the blooming progression of the cherry trees to pinpoint exactly when they will make their grand appearance is called the Sakura Zensen, which translates to the cherry blossom front. All of this tracking includes everything from the blooming, known as kaika, to the full bloom, known as mankai. The buds, fully bloomed flowers, and ultimately the falling petals is an entire experience worth witnessing, all in the span of maximum 2 weeks. As to when exactly they'll bloom, it changes every year and also depending on the region, spreading from March to May. Certain regions in Japan get warmer earlier than others, while some are still colder when the rest of the country is already halfway into spring. In general, northern Japan gets the later blooming cherry blossoms, while the central and southern part might get lucky enough to get the early bloomers. Get ready from mid-March onwards for areas like Tokyo and Osaka, all the way till early May for Hokkaido. If you're traveling to Japan in spring, don't worry about matching the dates to the full bloom. Because it's so spread out across a few months, travelers wouldn't have to worry so much about catching the perfect flight for the ideal week of sakura blooming. Whichever time you're in Japan, as long as it's within the months of March to May, you're bound to see some pink blooms on your trip. Now, our last quick vocab recap. Kaika yoso, blooming forecast. Sakura zensen, cherry blossom front. Kaika, blooming. Mankai, full bloom. Sakuras aren't just beautiful pale pink flowers that take over the landscape of Japan in the months of spring. They have quite a background and significance in the Japanese culture. From being the symbol of life to a celebration that brings people together, there is no doubt that these cherry blossoms are here to stay and continue to dominate the spring season of the land of the rising sun. And they're more than welcome to. We all love a full blossoming sakura spring. Do you go crazy about sakuras as much as I do? Tell us your thoughts by commenting on our social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Also, head over to Nihongo Master blog if you're interested in reading up on topics like these some more. And if you're keen on picking up some more Japanese for yourself, pop onto our official website, nihongomaster.com, to learn more. While you're at it, why not get yourself a subscription? Get a head start on your Nihongo journey with Nihongo Master. And thank you so much for listening in. Join me in the next one, where I'll be walking you down the avenue of Japan's rich spring culture. Mata ne!